Okay, real quickly, and this is where we're going to pick up next time. What are we supposed to do about this truth that we're supposed to be steeped in? Last verse, Ephesians 4, and then we just have 3 minutes, and we're going to go. Ephesians 4, I want to show you why we gather as the church. Ephesians 4, I shared this at the new members class yesterday. It was such a blessing with all those dear, excited, enthused saints. But God's plan for training each believer in truth so that they can offer worship in spirit and in truth is laid out in Ephesians 4:11 through 14. And let me just read this to you, and then we'll be done. Ephesians 4:11, it says, He gave some to be apostles, and some to be prophets, and some to be evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers. God has a plan to spread His truth, so He sends those He has gifted to declare and teach His truth. That's God's plan. And God calls and gifts believers for each generation, and He asks us to seek and find His plan that He has for our life. And so what God does is He calls these servants of His church, and they're supposed to serve. Now look at verse 12. For the perfecting of the saints. The reason that there are all of these gifted servants in the church is to perfect the saints for the work of the ministry, to the building up the body of Christ. God's plan is that every saint, be able to minister to one another. And if we know the truth, if we know what God's called us to do, then He gives us the strength to do it. And so that means that the spiritual leaders are to be monitoring whether the church is raising up disciples in God's truth or just serving listeners. Do you know what one of the biggest callings of leaders is? To see whether it's really happening in the church or if everybody's just out there hearing and not doing. The leaders are to be constantly making sure that disciples are being made, not listeners. The next verse, verse 13. Here's the goal. We all have to come to the unity of the faith, to the knowledge of the Son of God, a full grown man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. We have to keep the focus on our mission, not the bumps. The goal is all equipped disciples are discipling others in the truth. Do you know how you know if you're spiritually mature? You have someone under your wing that you're sharing and bringing along with Christ. And if you don't have anybody under your wing, you're immature. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I said, if we could all put on those glasses like you do at Disney, where you see 3D, if we could put on spiritual glasses and look at everybody and they would be physically the size that they are spiritually, we would see in church a lot of people whose feet aren't touching the floor. They're not yet engaged doing what they're supposed to do. They're still sitting. You ever have kids and their feet are just hanging off the pew? They don't touch yet. They need help all the time. We are spiritually immature until we're walking on our own and we're holding someone else's hand and helping them. And that's why it says in verse 14, then we'll no longer be children, Ephesians 4:14. We won't be tossed and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of man and craftiness after the wiles of error. Without personal trainers alongside believers, the work doesn't get done. Believers are weakened by sin and the church stagnates. We never know everything, but everyone can know enough of the truth to walk in the Spirit and guide someone else. And that's the God of truth we serve.